He rescued a shivering little pet and gained the attention of its royal mistress. The wreckage hissed and sparked against the crimson desert floor, twisted metal still glowing from atmospheric entry. Kane Reeves crouched behind a jagged boulder, his tactical scanner painting heat signatures across his visor. 3 Zephyrian patrol units circled the crash site like vultures, their weapons charged and ready. He should have called it in to Admiral Cross immediately. Should have waited for backup. Should have done a lot of things that didn't involve creeping through hostile territory toward an alien vessel. But the distress beacon wasn't broadcasting standard military frequencies. It pulsed with something else entirely. A rhythm that tugged at instincts he couldn't name. Kane adjusted his rifle's scope, watching the nearest patrol sweep past his position. 20 meters. Too close for comfort, but the sandstorm would provide cover for another few minutes before the wind shifted. He'd trained for worse odds. The patrol's footsteps crunched away into the swirling dust. Kane sprinted across the open ground, boots finding purchase on the scorched metal hull. The ship's design was unlike anything in his database. Organic curves blended seamlessly with technological precision, as if grown rather than built. Emergency lighting flickered through cracks in the hull, casting eerie shadows across symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. A sound stopped him cold, soft, barely audible over the storm's howl. Not mechanical, something alive. Kane followed the sound to a gaping hole torn in the ship's side. Inside, bioluminescent panels provided dim illumination, revealing a cockpit designed for someone much taller than any human. The pilot's seat was empty, but the sound came again. A weak mewling from beneath a collapsed bulkhead. He wedged his rifle into the debris and leveraged the metal plate upward. Underneath, a small creature lay motionless, except for the shallow rise and fall of its chest. Kane's breath caught. It looked like a cross between a house cat and something from a fever dream. Sleek blue-black fur rippled with patterns that seemed to shimmer with their own light. Pointed ears twitched weakly, and when it opened its eyes, they glowed with an intelligence that made his heart skip. The creature was dying. Kane's combat medkit wasn't designed for alien physiology, but the basics were universal. Circulation, respiration, trauma response. He'd patched up enough wounded soldiers to recognize shock when he saw it. The creature's breathing was labored, its body temperature dropping fast. Easy there, little one. Kane's voice seemed to calm the creature. It stopped struggling as he carefully lifted it from the wreckage, noting the weight of it. Heavier than it looked, with a bone structure that felt almost avian beneath the fur. No obvious external injuries, but internal trauma was always the bigger concern with crash survivors. His scanner picked up movement outside. The Zephyrian patrol was returning. Kane cradled the creature against his chest and moved deeper into the ship. A storage compartment near the rear provided shelter, and he activated his suit's stealth protocols as boots clanged on the hull above. The creature's breathing grew more ragged. Whatever was wrong, Kane was running out of time to fix it. He opened his medkit with practiced efficiency. The bioscanner couldn't identify the creature's species, but it registered massive internal bleeding and what looked like neural shock. Kane's hands moved automatically, drawing a dose of universal coagulant. The injection sites were a guess. He hoped the creature's circulatory system followed patterns he recognized. The needle slid in smoothly. The creature's eyes fixed on his face as the medicine took effect, pupils dilating and contracting in a rhythm that seemed almost like communication. Kane found himself speaking softly, the way he had to injured soldiers who needed to hear a human voice. "You're going to be okay. Whatever happened here, you're safe now." The bleeding slowed. Kane used his emergency blanket to wrap the creature, maintaining body heat while his suit's medical sensors monitored vital signs through the thermal contact. Outside, the Zephyrian patrol continued their search, voices carrying through the storm. They were getting closer. The first Zephyrian appeared just as Kane reached the opening. Training took over. His sidearm materialized in his free hand, 3 precise shots dropping the hostile before it could raise an alarm. But the sound would draw others. Kane ran. The storm provided cover, but it also made navigation nearly possible. His beacon pulsed weakly through the interference, guiding him toward the ridge where he'd left his craft. Behind him, shouts echoed through the wind as more Zephyrians converged on the crash site. They'd found their dead colleague by now. The creature stirred in his arms, making sounds that weren't quite purrs but carried the same soothing vibration. Its eyes stayed fixed on his face, and Kane found himself moving with more confidence than the conditions should have allowed, almost as if the creature was somehow helping him navigate. His ship materialized out of the swirling dust, a sleek reconnaissance craft designed for exactly this kind of extraction. Kane sealed them both inside and fired the engines before the Zephyrians could triangulate his position. The craft lifted off smoothly, leaving the alien wreckage behind. Only when they'd cleared the atmosphere did Kane allow himself to breathe. The creature lay quiet in his lap, vital signs stable but weak. His medical bay would have better equipment, but the basics were already working. Whatever this being was, it was a survivor. Kane set course for the nearest neutral station, where he could treat the creature properly without explaining its presence to his superiors. The decision felt right in a way that had nothing to do with military protocol. The creature's eyes opened again as they entered hyperspace, stars streaming past the viewport in brilliant lines of light. It looked up at Kane with an expression that seemed to hold gratitude, intelligence, and something else, a recognition that transcended species barriers. Kane had rescued enemy survivors before. It was part of the job, written into the military code he'd sworn to uphold. But this felt different, personal, as if saving this small life had shifted something fundamental in the universe around him. He had no way of knowing that 3 sectors away, a fleet of ships had already detected the destruction of their scout vessel, or that their commander, a princess whose bond with her companion transcended anything humans understood about loyalty, was already plotting a course to retrieve what belonged to her. Kane simply held the small creature close and watched the stars wheel past, unaware that he'd just set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power across multiple systems. The creature purred, a sound like distant thunder, and Kane found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. Kane's proximity alarm screamed him awake 3 days later. Through his ship's viewport, the stars vanished behind the shadow of something massive. Not one ship, an entire battle fleet, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian against the void. He'd never seen vessels of this design before, all flowing curves and predatory grace, as if someone had convinced living shadows to take the shape of warships. "This is Captain Kane Reeves of the Terran Reconnaissance Corps," he transmitted on standard frequencies. "State your intentions." Static answered him. Then the comm crackled to life with a voice that sent electricity down his spine, rich, commanding, with an accent that turned each word into music. "Captain Reeves, you have something that belongs to me." Kane's gaze shifted to the small creature curled in the makeshift nest he'd built near the pilot's station. Nira, he'd started calling her that after she'd responded to the name, lifted her head at the sound of the voice, ears perking with sudden alertness. A soft trill escaped her throat. "I rescued a survivor from a crash site," Kane replied carefully. "If you're here to claim her, you'll need to prepare for boarding." The comm went dead. Kane's hands moved to his weapon controls, then stopped. Whatever these ships were capable of, his reconnaissance craft wouldn't last 30 seconds in a fight. And something in that voice, the same quality that had drawn him to rescue Nira in the first place, told him violence wasn't the answer here. The docking tube sealed with a soft hiss. Kane stood near the airlock, Nira cradled in his arms, and waited. The first figure through the airlock took his breath away. She moved like liquid mercury given form, tall and elegant in armor that seemed grown rather than forged. Intricate blue markings traced patterns across her skin, geometric designs that pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, following the graceful lines of her face and disappearing beneath the collar of her form-fitting suit. Her ears swept to elegant points, and her hair fell like a midnight waterfall around shoulders that spoke of both nobility and lethal capability. But it was her eyes that held him captive. They burned with the same intelligent fire he'd seen in Nira's gaze, ancient and fierce and impossibly beautiful. "Princess Zhara Vel'tani of the Kythara Empire," she announced, though her attention was entirely focused on the creature in Kane's arms. "And you are the human who saved my Nira." Kane found his voice somewhere in the vicinity of his boots. "Captain Kane Reeves. She was badly injured when I found her." Zhara stepped closer, close enough that Kane could see the delicate patterns of silver thread worked through her armor, close enough to catch the scent of something like jasmine and starlight. Nira chirped and stretched toward her mistress, but didn't leave Kane's arms. "Show me," Zhara commanded softly. Kane knelt and set Nira on the deck between them. The creature moved with careful grace, still favoring her left side where the internal bleeding had been worst. Zhara's hands hovered over her companion, not quite touching, while those luminous markings on her skin pulsed brighter. "You used primitive medical techniques," she observed, fingers tracing the air above Nira's fur. "Crude by our standards. Yet she lives when she should have died." Kane bristled at the dismissal. Those crude techniques saved her life. Zhara's gaze snapped to his face, and for a moment Kane wondered if he'd just signed his own death warrant. Then her expression shifted into something that might have been surprise. Yes, she said quietly. They did. Our healers would have applied sophisticated biotechnology, precise genetic manipulation, cellular regeneration matrices, all of which require equipment you did not possess. She touched Nira's head with gentle fingers, and the creature purred. Instead, you improvised, adapted, succeeded where our advanced methods would have failed due to circumstance. Kane watched the interplay between princess and companion, the obvious deep bond between them. She's not just a pet, is she? Nira is my heart sister, Zhara replied. We are bonded from birth, our life forces intertwined. When she was injured, I felt every moment of her pain. When she began to heal, those burning eyes fixed on Kane again. I felt her gratitude toward you as well. The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. Kane found himself studying the elegant line of Zhara's throat, the way her armor clung to curves that suggested both softness and steel. Your rescue of Nira was not motivated by politics or profit, Zhara continued, rising to her full height. She was tall enough to look Kane directly in the eye, which few women were. Our intelligence networks confirm you asked for no reward, sent no ransom demands. You simply helped. Anyone would have done the same. Zhara's laugh was like silver bells in a gentle wind. Captain Reeves, in my experience, very few beings would risk their lives for a creature they had never seen before, from a species they knew nothing about. Fewer still would do so while under enemy fire. She moved around him in a slow circle, studying him the way a predator might examine something that had surprised her. Kane felt heat building under his collar. My council expects me to reward you handsomely and send you on your way, she said. Gold, technology, territorial concessions, the standard diplomatic offerings. And instead, Zhara stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Kane could see his own reflection in her eyes. Instead, I find myself curious about the human who values life above his own safety, who improvises solutions where others would surrender to fate, who earns the loyalty of a creature that bonds with very few outside our species. Nira chirped from the floor, butting her head against Kane's leg before padding over to rub against Zhara's armored boots. The princess smiled, and the expression transformed her from beautiful to devastating. It seems my heart sister has developed an attachment, she murmured. Most unusual. She has never shown affection for aliens before. Kane knelt to scratch behind Nira's ears, earning another pleased trill. When he looked up, he found Zhara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your ship is damaged, she observed. Your supplies are running low. You're days from the nearest human outpost. It wasn't a question, but Kane nodded anyway. Then perhaps you would accept the hospitality of the Kythara Empire while repairs are made, as my personal guest. The offer carried weight that had nothing to do with diplomacy. Kane found himself looking into eyes that held secrets older than human civilization, feeling the pull of something that transcended species barriers. I'd be honored, Your Highness. Zhara's smile widened, and those blue markings on her skin pulsed brighter. Please, call me Zhara. The Kythara flagship was a cathedral of living metal and starlight. Kane followed Zhara through corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, past chambers where waterfalls of light cascaded upward. Everything curved with organic grace, as if the ship had been grown rather than built. Nira padded between them, fully recovered and moving with feline confidence. She chirped at wall panels that responded by brightening, as if the ship itself recognized her presence. Your quarters, Zhara announced, gesturing to a suite that would have housed Kane's entire reconnaissance crew. Crystal formations grew from the walls, casting prismatic rainbows across surfaces that shifted color with his heartbeat. Kane turned to thank her and found Zhara closer than expected. The scent of jasmine and starlight enveloped him, and those blue markings on her skin pulsed in rhythm with his pulse. The Council of Houses expects to meet with you tomorrow, she said, her voice carrying an undertone that suggested duty warring with desire. They wish to discuss formal relations between our peoples. And you? What do you wish to discuss? The question hung between them like a charged particle. Zhara's eyes dropped to his mouth, then back up. I wish to understand how a warrior can be so gentle, how someone trained for violence can choose compassion. Kane stepped closer, drawn by forces that had nothing to do with gravity. Maybe you should ask Nira. She seems to understand me better than I understand myself. At the sound of her name, Nira chirped and leaped onto the room's central platform, settling herself with the air of a creature who approved. Zhara laughed, the sound rippling through Kane's chest like music. She has always been an excellent judge of character. I have learned to trust her instincts. And what do her instincts tell her about me? Before Zhara could answer, alarms began shrieking throughout the ship. The bioluminescent corridors strobed from blue to angry crimson, and Kane heard the distinctive whine of weapons powering up. Zhara's transformation was instant. The sensual princess vanished, replaced by a warrior commander whose presence filled the room like a gathering storm. Battle stations, she snapped into the air. Report. A holographic display materialized between them, showing the tactical situation. 3 vessels had dropped out of hyperspace at close range, sleek predators whose hostile intent was unmistakable. Princess, came a voice through the comm system. Lord Commander Voss Kaethe demands immediate audience. He claims right of challenge under the old codes. Kane saw Zhara's jaw tighten, those blue markings flaring brighter with anger. Voss, she said, the name carrying enough venom to kill small planets. I should have known. Who is he? A rival from the inner courts. He seeks to claim my position through archaic laws that should have died with the previous dynasty. Zhara's fingers danced over control surfaces that rose from the walls. He has chosen his moment well. While I am far from home, investigating human territories. The ship shuddered as weapons fire struck their shields. Kane's combat instincts kicked in. What's your tactical situation? 3 heavy cruisers against my flagship. Normally not a concern, but the old challenge codes require single combat. If I refuse, he can claim my throne by default. If I accept, he will have arranged the terms to favor himself. And if you win? Then he dies and his fleet will withdraw according to tradition. Zhara's smile was predatory, but Voss is not known for honoring tradition when it does not serve him. The comm crackled again, and a new voice filled the room, male, cultured, dripping with false civility. Princess Zhara, how delightful to find you so far from home, entertaining aliens. The way Voss spoke the word made it sound obscene. I invoke the right of ascension. Face me in single combat, or abdicate your claim to the throne. Kane watched Zhara's reaction, noting the subtle tells he'd learned to read in combat situations. The way her shoulders set, the fractional change in her breathing pattern, the slight tremor in her hands that spoke of fury held in check. She's not going alone, Kane said quietly. Zhara spun to face him. This is not your battle, Captain. Kythara law doesn't apply to humans. Kane was already moving toward the door. You said single combat. It doesn't specify single combat between whom. Kane, no, you don't understand what you're... I understand that someone is threatening the woman who... Kane paused, surprised by what he'd been about to say. I understand that Voss made this personal when he insulted your judgment. Nira chirped from her platform, a sound that somehow conveyed agreement. Zhara looked between them, and Kane could see her weighing duty against desire, tradition against the growing connection between them. Voss will not fight fairly, she warned. He has been enhanced with combat modifications, neural accelerators, reflex boosters. He is more machine than man. Kane checked his sidearm and smiled grimly. Then it's a good thing I'm still just human. The transport bay thrummed with tension as they prepared for boarding. Zhara had armed herself with weapons that seemed to flow like liquid metal, adapting their configuration to her touch. Her armor had shifted too, becoming more angular while maintaining its organic beauty. Stay behind me, she instructed as the docking tube sealed. Let me handle Voss. Your presence alone will unbalance his plans. But when the airlock opened, revealing Voss Kaethe in all his augmented glory, Kane knew the situation had already spiraled beyond control. Voss stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body a fusion of Kythara nobility and technological enhancement. Cybernetic implants gleamed along his skull, and his eyes had been replaced with sensors that tracked movement with inhuman precision. My dear princess, still collecting strays, I see. Kane stepped forward before Zhara could respond. Lord Commander, I'm Captain Kane Reeves, Terran Reconnaissance Corps. I believe you wanted to discuss terms? Voss's enhanced gaze fixed on Kane, surprise flickering across his artificial features. Then he laughed, a sound like grinding gears. The human speaks. How amusing. Voss gestured to the chamber around them, a circular arena with energy barriers separating it from the void. Very well, you may watch your princess die with honor. Actually, Kane said, drawing his weapon in one smooth motion. I thought I'd participate. The energy blast took Voss in the shoulder before his enhanced reflexes could react, spinning him around and sending sparks flying from damaged cybernetics. When he turned back, his expression had shifted from amusement to lethal focus. So be it, Voss snarled. I will kill you both. Voss moved like liquid death, cybernetic enhancements allowing him to cross the arena in heartbeats. Kane rolled sideways as energy blasts scorched the deck where he'd been standing, his human reflexes barely keeping pace with the augmented lord's assault. You dare strike a noble of the Kythara Empire? Voss snarled, his weapon reconfiguring from pistol to rifle with mechanical precision. Kane fired back, forcing Voss to duck behind an energy barrier. I dare a lot of things when someone threatens people I care about. Zhara moved with deadly grace, her liquid metal weapons flowing into twin blades that sang through the air. She flanked Voss while Kane held his attention, their coordination instinctive despite never having fought together before. Impressive, Voss laughed, parrying Zhara's strike with enhanced reflexes. The princess has found herself a pet with claws. Kane's next shot took out one of Voss's cybernetic eyes, sparks cascading as the lord stumbled backward. But the damage only seemed to enrage him further. His remaining eye glowed brighter, and Kane could hear servos whining as internal systems compensated for the injury. Zhara pressed her advantage, her blades weaving patterns that forced Voss to retreat toward the arena's edge. But the lord had been enhanced for combat in ways that went beyond simple reflexes. His damaged arm suddenly extended on telescoping joints, catching Zhara across the chest and sending her crashing into the barrier wall. Kane heard her cry of pain and felt something primitive and violent uncage itself in his chest. He charged Voss directly, ignoring the energy blasts that seared past his head. At the last second, he dropped and slid between the lord's legs, firing upward into the maze of cybernetics that had replaced Voss's spine. The explosion of sparks and synthetic blood painted the arena floor. Voss screamed, a sound that mixed organic agony with electronic feedback. When he turned to face Kane, half his face had gone dark, artificial components failing in cascading sequences. You primitive savage! Voss gasped, raising his weapon with a hand that shook from damaged neural connections. I will tear you apart piece by piece. Get in line, Kane replied, then rolled away as Zhara's blade took Voss's weapon arm off at the elbow. The lord stared at the sparking stump where his hand had been, then began to laugh. The sound echoed off the arena walls with mechanical distortion. You think you've won? My fleet carries enough firepower to turn this sector into cosmic dust. Kill me, and they will open fire immediately. Zhara wiped blue blood from her lip, her armor cracked but her eyes blazing with fury. Your fleet follows you out of fear, Voss. Without your presence to hold them together, they'll scatter to whatever holes spawned them. Will they? Voss smiled with ruined features. Shall we test that theory? He triggered something in his remaining cybernetic systems. Through the arena's transparent barriers, Kane could see the 3 enemy ships moving into attack formation. Their weapons glowed with the hungry light of charging energy cannons. Kane grabbed Zara's hand, pulling her toward the nearest exit. How long do we have? Minutes. Perhaps less. She was breathing hard, and Kane could see pain in the way she moved. Voss's blow had done more damage than she'd admitted. The barriers will hold for a short time, but concentrated fire will breach them. They made it halfway across the transport bay before the first salvo struck. The ship bucked like a wounded animal, throwing them both against a bulkhead. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red, and Kane could hear the distinctive whine of failing power systems. Zhara struggled to her feet, one hand pressed to her ribs. Her blue markings had dimmed to barely visible traces, and Kane realized they must be connected to her physical condition. The command deck, she gasped. I need to coordinate our defense. Kane caught her arm as she swayed. You need medical attention first. There's no time. Another impact shook the ship, and somewhere in the distance, Kane heard the sound of atmosphere venting. If Voss's ships break through our shields, then we'll deal with it together. Kane pulled her against his chest, feeling the rapid flutter of her pulse through her armor. But I'm not letting you collapse from blood loss while trying to save everyone else. For a moment, Zhara's mask of command slipped. Kane saw the pain she was hiding, the exhaustion that came from years of carrying responsibility for an entire empire. Her head fell against his shoulder, and he felt some of the tension leave her body. I've been alone for so long, she whispered, making every decision, fighting every battle. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside me instead of behind me. Kane lifted her chin until their eyes met. You're not alone anymore. The kiss was inevitable, gravity and magnetism and every force in the universe conspiring to bring them together. Zhara's lips tasted like starlight and promises, and Kane felt something fundamental shift in his chest. This was no longer about duty or honor or even survival. This was about the woman in his arms and the future they might build together. When they broke apart, Zhara's markings were glowing brighter, as if their connection had somehow recharged her internal systems. She pressed her forehead against his, breathing in sync with his heartbeat. My people have a saying, she murmured. When two hearts beat as one, the universe itself must yield to their combined will. Another impact, stronger than the rest, sent them stumbling. But this time, they moved together, supporting each other as they made their way toward the command deck. Through the ship's transparent sections, Kane could see Voss's fleet closing in for the kill, their weapons glowing like predatory eyes. "What's our tactical situation?" Kane asked as they reached the bridge. Zhara's crew snapped to attention, their bioluminescent markings pulsing in patterns Kane was beginning to recognize as emotional responses. Fear, determination, loyalty, all written in living light across alien features. "Shields at 60% and falling," reported the tactical officer. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Lord Commander Voss's flagship is moving to ramming position." Kane studied the tactical display, his human perspective offering new angles on the problem. "What if we don't try to outfight them?" Zhara looked at him with renewed interest. "Explain." Voss said his fleet follows him out of fear. "What happens if we give them something to fear more than his displeasure?" Kane's smile was predatory as he outlined his plan. It was insane, dangerous, and completely human in its audacity. It was also exactly what the situation required. Zhara's answering smile was equally fierce. "My people are going to love you, Kane Reeves." "Just your people?" "We'll discuss that after we survive the next 10 minutes. Kane took his position at the human-adapted console that materialized at Zhara's command. "Then let's make sure we have something to discuss." Kane's fingers flew across the alien interface, human intuition translating Kythara technology into something he could understand. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to outgun 3 heavy cruisers, they would turn Voss's own paranoia against his fleet. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," Kane announced. "Voss's ships should be receiving our message now." On the main display, tactical readouts showed the enemy formation beginning to waver. Kane's transmission was elegant psychological warfare, a recording of Voss's own voice, artificially modified to suggest he was planning to eliminate his own captains once the battle was won. The beauty lay in its plausibility. Everyone knew Voss trusted no one. "Flagship is breaking formation," reported the tactical officer, excitement rippling through her bioluminescent markings. "The other 2 ships are targeting each other." Zhara moved to stand beside Kane's console, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Brilliant. You turned their fear of Voss into fear of each other. Humans excel at finding creative solutions when conventional tactics fail," Kane replied, catching her eye with a smile. "It's one of our more attractive qualities." The enemy fleet dissolved into chaos as years of mistrust erupted into open conflict. Voss's flagship tried desperately to restore order, but Kane's fabricated voice kept broadcasting instructions that only made the situation worse. "Princess," came Admiral Cross's voice through Kane's personal comm, cutting through the moment. "Captain Reeves, report your status immediately." Kane's blood chilled. In the heat of battle, he'd forgotten about his own duties. Zhara noticed his expression change, her hand tightening on his shoulder. "This is Captain Reeves. Situation is under control, Admiral." "Under control?" "Our sensors show you aboard an alien flagship engaged in combat. You will extract yourself immediately and return for debriefing." Kane looked at the tactical display, where Voss's fleet was destroying itself with efficient brutality. He looked at Zhara's crew, whose markings pulsed with respect. He looked at Nira, who had somehow made her way to the bridge and was watching him with intelligent eyes. Finally, he looked at Zhara herself, warrior and princess, and the woman who had become the center of his universe. "Admiral," Kane said slowly, "I'm afraid I can't do that." The silence stretched long enough for Kane to hear his own heartbeat. When Cross spoke again, her voice carried the weight of military law. "Captain, you are perilously close to treason. Explain yourself." Kane took Zhara's hand, feeling the subtle pulse of energy through her markings. Her eyes held question and hope in equal measure. "Admiral, I've discovered something here that changes everything. The Kythara aren't just potential allies, they're potential family. Their capacity for loyalty, their warrior culture that values honor above conquest." Kane squeezed Zhara's fingers. "We could learn from each other, grow stronger together. And your recommendation, Captain?" Kane made his choice with startling clarity. "My recommendation is formal alliance, cultural exchange, and I'm requesting assignment as permanent human liaison to the Kythara Empire." The explosion came from the tactical display as Voss's flagship succumbed to crossfire from his own fleet. The remaining ships, realizing they'd been manipulated, broke off and fled into hyperspace. But Kane barely noticed. Zhara was staring at him with an expression that made his chest tight. "You would leave your people? Your world? For us?" she asked softly. "I would stay with the woman who taught me that strength and compassion aren't opposites," Kane replied. "The woman who trusted me to stand beside her in battle." the woman whose heart beats in rhythm with mine. Admiral Cross's voice crackled through the comm. Captain Reeves, the Terran Council will need to approve any formal alliance. Until then, Zhara interrupted, activating her communications array. Captain Reeves is under the protection of the Kythara Empire. Any attempt to remove him against his will would be considered an act of war. Kane grinned at the diplomatic bombshell she'd dropped. Admiral, I believe we have a situation that requires negotiation at the highest levels. A long pause. Then, indeed we do, Captain. 3 months later, Kane stood on the observation deck of the Kythara flagship, watching twin suns set over the capital world of the Empire. Nira lounged in alien sunlight, purring as she watched Kane and Zhara move through a combat training routine that was equal parts dance and deadly art. The formal ceremonies had been completed. The alliance between Earth and the Kythara Empire, the cultural exchange programs, the joint exploration initiatives. Kane's role as liaison had been approved by both governments. But the most important ceremony had been private, conducted according to Kythara tradition with only Nira as witness. The bonding ritual that linked Kane's life force to Zhara's, creating a connection that transcended species. Kane could feel that connection now as Zhara moved beside him, her bioluminescent markings pulsing in harmony with his heartbeat. When she attacked, he countered without thought. When he advanced, she flowed around his movement like water. They fought as one being with two bodies. Enough, Zhara called, stepping back with a smile that outshone both suns. I think we've proven that human and Kythra combat techniques complement each other quite well. Kane pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. Is that what we were proving? Among other things. Her markings brightened as his lips found the sensitive spot below her ear. Though I suspect the Council has already reached that conclusion based on our previous demonstrations. Kane laughed, remembering the shock on noble faces when they'd walked into the council chamber holding hands. Kythera nobility weren't known for public displays of affection. Any regrets? She asked, the question carrying weight despite its casual tone. Kane looked out at the alien landscape that had become home, felt the warm weight of Nira as she draped herself across both their shoulders, breathed in the scent of jasmine and starlight that would forever mean safety. Just one, he said, watching Zhara's markings dim with concern. I regret that it took a crash landing for me to find you. Her smile was radiant as she kissed him, and Kane tasted the future on her lips, exploration and discovery, challenges and triumphs, a love that would bridge species and reshape the galaxy. Nira purred her approval, and Kane realized that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. He'd rescued a shivering little pet and gained the attention of its royal mistress. He'd never made a better trade in his life.